Smith and my incredible friends. So today, hey, I'm joined by the incredible Amanda Kirby. We've been doing a series on A to Z of parenting because we really wanted to help parents. We know they're struggling. We know they struggle going into work, right? Having to worry about their children. We know they're struggling on transition points. Actually, they're just struggling on all kinds of stuff, right? It's really tough to be a parent, especially when your child has additional needs outside of what is being offered as support mechanisms within the education system, or where they're just being failed, right? And unfortunately, too many young people are being failed. So I've had Amanda on before onto the podcast. Of course I have. Why wouldn't I? She's one of the most notable, incredible people on the planet in terms of expertise around neurodiversity, neuroinclusion. I don't care. I'm saying it, right? I'm calling it out. And that's how it is. Fact from Theo. Theo's facts. So I'm really pleased to have her
Or
on
fiction.
today.
Or fiction.
Yeah. Well, it's my. Hey, I'm allowed to. It's my show. I'll say what I want. But today we're going to talk about transitions because I know Amanda's written loads about this. It's a topic that is currently close to my heart and head and pain and life, and because my child is just going through the transition of primary into secondary. And then I'm probably doing a lot of catastrophizing at the moment, and people are telling me off for doing it. But you worry, right, as a parent. So that's what I wanted to get into. We're close to the young people going back to those school environments, and I just wanted to have a real conversation. Just before we get into it, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, Amanda, do you just want to give us like the headlines?
Okay, so I'm a parent, that's the headline. I'm a grandparent, that's the headline. And I've got lots of experience of doing that over lots of years. And that's what got me interested in neurodiversity and neuroinclusion, because I was a parent and I was experiencing that and experienced lots of things like those transitions from primary to secondary school and secondary school to further education and further education into employment. All of those transition points were always a touch point for me, even going from year to year, school year to school year. And I see that with my own grandchildren as well as my children. And so it really is something that I've focused on a lot. And then I'm a doctor, ran a clinical service, saw thousands of families over the last 30 years as well. So I heard those stories of the issues and then worked with educators. How do we manage those transitions and make them easier? So listen, Theo, I'm delighted to be here today because this is like home, right? And we both believe these are really important conversations. So yeah, really pleased to be here to talk about this and to really think about what do we really need to be worried about or not worried about at this point in time.
Amazing. And Amanda, you're also the author of enough books to fill your own bookshelf. Don't forget that. And we were lucky enough to write Neurodiversity at Work together, which won Business Book of the Year awards for D&I category, which we're very pleased about. But go and read that if you want. But today we're focusing on the parents, right? And actually, not enough, I think, is written about and talked about. You do a lot, of course. But about like the parent, lots is written about the children, right? Yeah. But like the parent, the stress the parents go through, the anxiety they go through, the impact on their mental health and well-being, the fact that they're probably ND, that they may be autistic, dyslexic, dyscalculate, whatever, right? And that they may have suffered from anxiety and depression, or may still, like all of this thing is existing for the parent. Yet we're constantly talking about the children. Yeah. So today I want to unpack some of that. And let's start with that, right, Amanda? So let's talk about Amanda, as we've got you on as the parent and the grandparent. How do you remember school for your kids and maybe the grandkids, and maybe even yourself, and some of these big transitional moments? Give us some of your experiences, the good and the bad.
The good and the bad. I think one of the things, if I look back, was I was worrying. I worried about what would happen next. And some of that became a reality and some of it wasn't always fulfilled completely. But I remember the school gates in the very early days when one of my children we'd had a diagnosis. But I remember standing at the school gates and feeling like it's a bit like when I remember a conversation when your children have knits and you're the only child in the class who's got knits, and then all the parents look at you and go, "It's you're the knit parent," right? And that sort of feeling of being slightly othered, in a way that when parents ask other kids to tea and your child's not asked as much, or asked to parties and your child's not asked as much, those things are really hard as a parent, right? So the sort of day-to-day of how do I embed my child in this new environment? So any transition, going from even 1 year to another year, a new teacher, who they're going to sit next to, a change in uniform. So maybe they're going from tracky pants to trousers, and how they're going to undo them to go for a pee at break time. Going from having lunches, bringing your lunch, to having school lunches. Will they be able to carry a tray or use the knife and fork or spill things? All of those small things which were big things. Will they be able to get changed to go to gym? Will they be able to tie their shoelaces up? Will they get there on time or get in trouble? And some of those became a reality that they got. I remember one of my kids getting told off because he couldn't print off his laptop because the plug was locked in a cupboard, because the teacher had locked the plug in a cupboard, so he couldn't take notes, and getting told off because a teacher might not have understood quite how he worked effectively. Contrast to that was sometimes we had the most amazing teachers who really got my children and grandchildren, made a connection, a relationship, got there. Most of my family have got a wacky sense of humour. I don't know where that's come from. And they, and where they had a teacher who sort of got them and could see their strengths, it was a relief to me that this was going to be all right this year, but that concern about the relationships, if they were having a teaching assistant, whether that was going to work or not. But it was a lot of the tiny minutiae that we go into today, really, that actually it's the small drips in the bucket that make an impact. It's not one thing, it's taking the day. And that's one of the things that I realized is planning ahead. Even at this point in time, we've only got a couple of weeks to the new school year, you can make a difference, And for schools, well, they need to start planning transition in January, right? For the next school year. They really do. I always go, when Christmas is every year. Well, the start of a new year when it is. Why do we become surprised? Oh, it's the new year, right? Why do we do that? We need to be planning for it in plenty of time. So let's talk about some of those small things and maybe go through a day and a week, and what we can do in the next couple of weeks to make a really difference. Because as a parent, you lie in bed at night and you worry, because you worry about their relationships and the impact that's going to have on them, because you will have that. A good day at school is a good night at home. A bad day at school is like, they come home and you're tired. And the trouble is, homework's at the wrong time of the day. It's when you're knackered as well. And if they're tired and they can't sit down and they don't sleep, it has an impact on the whole family, not just you as a parent, but sibs as well. And I remember, siblings also being impacted by that as well. They were doing parenting as well sometimes,
Absolutely. We'll talk about, first of all, the school in general, and then I'd like to get on to the big transition. So whether that's transitioning into school for the first time, and your child is showing some challenges, maybe they're non-verbal, maybe there's certain markers that they've not met that other children in nursery are meeting, for example. And then we'll look at the high school transition, which I'm looking at. But first of all, let's do exactly that. Let's just think about planning for a day or planning for the next day, and then we can work towards planning what things do we need to consider for the next 2 weeks, what we can start to get. Because like literally from my experience, like you cannot plan enough, like getting your child to wear their school shoes before they start. So we've already bought them, and my daughter's already walking around in them, and it took a lot to buy them because we had to try lots on, weren't happy. This criteria ran right for the school. you could take that and you could break that down into everything, right? That's just a pair of school
Absolutely.
shoes. Now you
Yeah.
need to think about the clothes, the tops, the type of books, the pens, that all of them have like aesthetic.
And
They have
each have a
the way
little
they
strip
feel,
down. Yeah.
look. It's like,
You've got to think about what each one and then unpack each one.
so go on then, Amanda. What are some of
Okay.
the things that we can consider?
Always start the day before, right? So that's the first thing. Okay. There's an odd sense that time is shorter in the morning than it is in the evening. So, and it is, 10 minutes in the morning when you're all rushing out and you're all doing things. So you want to prepare the night before what's going to happen. So you've got time then. And that comes from, so if you're thinking about new, whether that's it, or going back to school, it's a new year, even if it's not a new school or it's a new. So thinking about getting out the clothes the night before, even if it's the same uniform they're putting on or no uniform. So getting that out, laying it out so you know where everything is. And your child knowing as well. So even if you've got young children or older children, a visual timetable can really help where you are this week. So it's Monday. Let's look at, so it's Sunday. We're going to Monday. What have we got tomorrow? So they can go, they know you're organized, helps them to reduce their level of anxiety. The other thing is to put a basket by the front door. Put what they need, their school bag. Put their school bag when they come in the basket, and you put stuff in it. So when you're going back after, if you're doing homework or whatever, you get into a routine that everything goes in the school bag. The school bag's by the front door, so you're not hunting for the school bag and going hunting for everything. If your child's in school, have 3 pencil cases, right? Not one, right? Have one you leave in school and you ask them, can we leave it in school? One they stay in their bag and one at home, because you can never have enough protractors, because, shops shut. Well, they don't these days. You can go to Asda or any other supermarket, and get rulers and stuff. But having your place set up, so the bedroom set up, you're laying out the clothes, you've got a visual timetable, and you can see, as you said rightly, Theo, you might be neurodivergent and planning and organizing can be harder for you. So let's get those things in order, okay? And then really think about, what are the news, right? So make a list of all the news: new uniform, new vest, new shirt, wear a tie, it's a tracksuit, it's trousers with a new fastening, it's new shoes with a Velcro or laces. Just sit and just brainstorm all the news, and go through the day and write all the news, right? New teacher, new children, new lunches, what's going to go on at the lunches. And then you have to sort of break that down. And the more you can create that list of news, the more you're going to be prepared. And, better to, I always say prepare rather than repair, right? Because I think it's much easier to do so. So if you're starting the night before, or you're starting the week before the night before, for the uniform, then you might need to think about, if it is a uniform or clothes or whatever, perhaps your child has to wear a shirt with buttons. Can they button and unbutton? If they can't button and unbutton, and they're going to need to do so, and they can't, you might need to think about adapted uniform, adapted clothing. And Marks and Spencer's and a number of places like Primark do adapted clothing these days. Or if you're natty with a needle and thread, what you can do is do things like take the buttons off and put them on the front of the shirt. So you sew them on, and then put a Velcro strip between where the shirt is, right? So you can just go and pat it down, right? So it looks like a button shirt, but you're just patting it down. That can be really helpful, right? Cuffs on a shirt if you're going to secondary school and you've got to undo the buttons and you can't do them. Putting some elastic on those so you can just put your arms through. If you're going from primary to secondary school, you want to look really important. You need to look like your peers as much as possible, because the most important thing as a teenager is peer acceptance at that stage. So those things have become even more important. And the stuff you can do in the first stage with adapting things, you've got to modify that when you get to secondary school. So think about it. Think about, lots of our kids don't like, I remember not liking, scratchy label at the back or textures. So it might be your child likes a soft t-shirt or vest underneath their shirt. So that might be important. Might be too hot for them. So you've got to think about that, because if they're anxious, they might get hotter, and that might cause them a problem. So getting the right shirt is going to be really important as well. Trousers. I remember one kid in school who was in tracky pants in primary school, then went to secondary school and had trousers with a button on the top. Now, in primary school, he would be going to the stalls and he'd just be pulling down his trousers to go for a pee. But there were stalls, so there was some privacy. In secondary school, it was I don't know what they're called, a gutter, to stand and pee, whatever that is, And this kid for day one pulled down his trousers arse to the wind. And then everyone around him remembered this kid doing that. So this is why it's important, these small things, because you can be marked out on day one, and that's so thinking about those things. Think about if you're moving from primary to secondary school, things like washing your hands, right? So this is where early start going to the primary school or going to nursery. What happens at toilet times? Because often toilet times are a real big deal for our kids, right? So is it a this? Is it a this? Is it a that? Is it a that? We don't just have a tap, and we don't just have a flush, and we don't have towels that you pull down, right? Every toilet's different. You can wave at them and hand, so knowing what that's going to be like, how do you dry your hands, and if it's all of those things help to know, is it a communal? I remember going to one school relatively recently, and they had like boys and girls toilets, but they had a sort of communal washing hand area, right? I'd never seen that. So knowing some of those things helps your child prepare. So I can keep going if you want me to. Yeah.
No, that's great. I was just for you to the communal thing is like in the service stations, they often have them, right? And I hate them. Like you go in there awkward, and and they're not the worst places to be already in a service station. Like I don't want to be there. And then you've got this extra thing of this awkwardness around. So I can see where some of these things, and you're right. My child has had 3 visits to the school because of the SEND needs. So they add extra visits, right? So they've been able to go 3 times. But still, that is going to be nothing in comparison to that kind of first day and first week of everything being new and the chaos of the school and going from a school with hundreds to thousands of people, for example. It's just mind-boggling. And then the hard work that's been done in primary to manage meltdowns, stress, anxiety, overstimulation, all of these things, it kind of you go back to a different space and place.
Really do.
And I
you
guess
really
that's
do.
the same as some of the other transitions when they first go into nursery, and there's just luckily we had one person who was willing to take my child by the hand and almost be the mum, and that was made a huge difference, right? To literally being able to hand our child over. If she was never there, it was horrendous. I mean, it was literally like we were handing our child to the most awful place and person, and that shows itself in different ways, shapes, and forms right throughout that education period. And you're right, what you mentioned there about at home if they've had a bad day. And by the way, that bad day can just be that they've been with somebody who's not nurturing and caring. That bad day could be that their friends decided they didn't want to play with them that day because they're very honest and direct and they say things how they see them, and other kids don't like that, and they say actually you're lying because you said this the other week and that the other week and that doesn't correlate with that, so you're not telling the truth. Whoa, that is like, you can't be telling kids that, yet it's factual. Kids are telling lies all the time. So all of a sudden you get ostracized from play and from group. So all of those things impact on the like the experience and their emotional regulation at the end of the day. And as parents, we can't control all of that, right? But we can control lots of those things. So I guess I'm saying how important, if you don't realize how important all of these small little things are, they are very important, because if you can put as much structure in place in the morning, in the evening, and take away lots of the choices so that they know what shoes they're going to wear because they wear the same ones every
Exactly.
day. They know what they're going to. They know where they are. We're not running around searching for them, which is hard. We
No.
always find all of those things can reduce the stress and anxiety, because there is going to be stress and anxiety in the school. It's going to happen.
I usually use a sort of bucket sort of metaphor, right? So you need to have capacity in your bucket to be able to cope. So by putting the structure in, you're lowering the level of the bucket, which means your child's got more capacity to then cope. Okay. So that's why people go, oh, it's that and that and that. That's not much. No, each one of those things lowers the bucket a little bit, which means your child's got more coping capacity. And I think you're right, Theo. These are not insignificant. Each one of these small actions is cumulative and means that you're giving your child the opportunity to not have to get worried. Because the other thing is, if you're stressed in the morning, your child's picking up on that stress as well. They're arriving at school feeling already their bucket's full. So one drip makes it overflow. So that's why putting the clothes out the night before, putting your bag out, making sure that breakfast is sorted, because we know some of our kids, if you don't give them the breakfast they like or the breakfast they want at that point in time, we're off, we're off on a one, and I've seen it, of course, I've experienced it myself firsthand. So just thinking about those things, and if they eat the same breakfast 5 days in a row, who cares, right? If that's the breakfast they have that gets them off to school and it keeps them calm, I'm not fighting that at all. It's not the point in time to do that. Or if I have to tie, I remember, dressing one of my kids to get them out the door, and it wasn't the time to do, I'm going to teach you shoelace tying today, right? They needed to be helped. And you'd go, well, they're 12, they should be doing it themselves. No, we help each other in a family in all sorts of ways. And that's not the time to teach some of those things at 10 to 8 on a Monday morning. You've got to do your own shoelaces, and you've got to pack your own bag. Scaffold, you're there to scaffold. So they arrive at school in a calm state and they're prepared for the day as much as they can, knowing curved balls are going to be thrown at them left, right, and centre. We can't control everything,
Absolutely not. And I think so. It's funny because for us, like the breakfast has been the same for a long time. Lots of the things are very, very similar. So it's a piece of toast, and it's now a piece of sourdough toast, right? It's very particular. It's not any old toast. Can't be.
Yes.
It's sourdough, and it has to be slightly overcooked. And I have to make it, and then there's and that's it, right? That's it. And they don't eat much at school at all, and we've had problems. So even when we had free school meals, we didn't, because they won't eat them. Because even though some of the foods are acceptable, the noise, the smells, the experience in the room, they don't want to eat. So this can play back to the idea and concept of not wanting to eat versus it's the space and place that is making it impossible for them to eat, not necessarily the food. And sometimes it's the food as well, right? Because it's not. But so, for example, and this is just to, I guess, help parents think about the food element. One is, if you give them good food in the morning and good food in the evening, you can control that. You got to understand that maybe you forgo good nutrition in the afternoon, right? And you just accept. So in the afternoon for us, often it's we've got a little canister, and we found that boiled rice was acceptable. So boiled rice in a thin cup, that's what we send. They'll have a little bit. Sometimes they won't have any. Sometimes they'll have a little bit, and then it's like a packet of salt and vinegar crisps and some other one or two other bit. That's it, like that, and water, lots of water. And sometimes you just have to accept that there's certain things you cannot control, but you absolutely can control the morning. And by giving that space and time in the morning as much as you can, for them to get ready, decompress, prepare themselves, I would say, if you can, and I know this is impossible, this is a privilege, find a space and a place in your house for your child to go.
I agree.
Maybe in their bedroom, it may, and you have to, again, not listen to other people going, I can't do this in the bedroom. They
No.
need a space or place. It can even be a partitioned part of a room.
Yeah.
Because noise can trigger them, smells, taste, textures.
Yeah.
People talking about stuff that they don't like can trigger them. And this is
No.
if they're already, like you said, they're already waking up for whatever reason. They've had a bad sleep. They went to bed. They're already full almost. And even though you've done everything else, anything could just trigger them, and then you find yourself in a really difficult position where you cannot get out that door.
No. So I think, so one of the things, so we've got the news, and so something like food. Always think about, is it the food is it the food? Is it the task? So I always think about task, individual, and environment. Okay. So is it the food, that the food sensitivity, the food content? Is it a task eating the food? So it could be carrying a tray, using knife and fork. So it's a skill that needs to be learned, that you could practice with your child. Is it the environment that's stopping them eat the food? So is it because it's loud and noisy? I remember moving to secondary school in a canteen, very echoey. So that was very disturbing. So being able to go somewhere quieter to eat is that a possibility, right? So is it a possibility? I know with one of my grandchildren taking a packed lunch, because then we can put in what they prefer to eat, right? Okay. So then we know we're getting some calories in, and then exactly breakfast and supper, you can pack in more of the stuff that you want to give. And compromise is something you have to learn, you know, and we all have to as parents, whatever the book was that we were given as the parenting guide. The one thing is, you have to learn that, yeah, it's a constant compromise. Because you can't, as you say, you can't control all the constraints that are going on outside in school when you're not with them. And as much as I wanted to go to school with my kids and sit next to them in school, they didn't really want me to be there, you know. So, yeah, and that goes on in adulthood. You can't, you know, you can't go to university with your child. It's just not very acceptable. So, I mean, I think, so always think of so the new, and then break it down. Is it a task that could be learned, that a skill that needs to be learned? And if it is, can we break it down into component parts? Now, home in the holidays or weekends, if your child's not tired, it can be a time to teach those skills and practice those skills. Do not try to teach and practice those skills at 10 to 8 in the morning, right? It isn't the time. You're not in a good position. They're not in a good position. And then you might need to compromise and do it. So it might be, if they're younger, you cut up their food for them, because then they're going to eat it. Because if you're sitting there and they can't use a knife and fork, or make sure you've got cutlery. So if they're younger children, have they got appropriate cutlery at home? Are they in a good sitting position? Are they stable with their feet on the floor and they'll be able to do it? And that's the same for writing as well. Are you stable? So that's where sometimes getting some guidance from somebody like an occupational therapist can be very helpful. If it's those sort of task strategy stuff, can be really helpful as well. So news, do your list of news, sit down, brainstorm everything from the moment they get out of bed to the moment they go back to bed, you know, what's going to be new. And then look, is it a skill that needs to be learned? Are they ready to learn the skill, right? So I think that's an important one. You might be going to primary school, you might be going to nursery, you might be going to secondary school. Your child might be still in secondary school at the pre-writing stage. They're not competent at writing and good writing, and everybody else is scribbling, and they're not there. So are you expecting too much of your child? Perhaps your child's going to nursery and all the other kids are trained and your child is still in nappies, you know. Or vocally, your child hasn't got the communication skills that other children at 3, 4, 5 have got. So again, look at where your child is developmentally, and don't expect them to be here in a day when they've got like a lot of steps to get there. So I think it's about being realistic about that as well, because sometimes that can be really hard. You go to school and you see all the other children doing so easily, kicking a ball, catching a ball, writing, whatever it is, having a conversation, making friends so easily, playing around in the playground and knowing how to start a conversation. And it's hard as a parent to see your child, or to hear that your child at breakdown is the one walking around the edges of the playground and got no one to play with, right? And that goes the other way, which is what's school going to do to support your child so they can participate and be active? So those are two big words: participate in class, in the playground, and be active. So that, what are they doing? What's the scaffolding they're putting in place? And that's a conversation you need to have.
That's brilliant. So let's, in a moment, we'll get on to what people can now think about. We're like 2 weeks left. What
Yep.
we can brainstorm some things people can start to think about, or maybe things they
Yep.
might miss out, or last moments of planning, or how to de-stress themselves as parents. But just before that, you've raised a really good point there. Let's just deal with that. Proactive ways of parents engaging with schools. And I think
Yep.
whether you're just going into school for the first time, whether you're just on the journey of thinking, oh, my child has some additional needs, they're facing some challenges, they're facing exclusion, how can parents, and it is often down to, sadly, it's down to individuals within the school who lead on send, for example, and some can be
Yeah.
really good and proactive and caring and compassionate and want to help. Some are completely overworked, and even if they wanted to help, they've not got enough space. And then others are just really difficult. That's the reality. So what
Mm.
advice can we give for parents to have the right conversations? And I've got one I want to share, actually, before we get on,
Okay.
and then I'll let you go. So one that I
Go.
used when we were having initial discussions, and there was some difficulty around trying to say, like, our child's having difficulty, and they were like, nah, we kind of don't think they are. They're happy, they sit at the back of the class quietly. I'm like, yeah, but they're not learning. We know they're
No.
not. We're looking at other kids, and we know they're not learning.
Mm.
And actually, we did a few things, but we went to Dyslexia Association event, and they talked about the legal parameters around getting support, and that you may have to legally challenge to get that support if you required it. And we were getting quite scared ourselves, because we think, oh goodness, we didn't
Mm.
even want to go down this route. We just wanted a bit of extra help.
Mm.
Well, in the end, we did Amanda's Do It Profiler with my child, and I did it myself. And we took the information that came from the Do It Profiler for my child, and actually we took that in as part of other evidence about our experiences at home, what was happening, meltdowns, everything else, and sat down with this head of SEND at that point, who's also the deputy head, and actually had a conversation and showed them all the information and walked through it with them. And you know what?
Mm.
That absolutely transformed the way that they spoke with us and engaged with us, because we were able to speak to them in a language that they could understand. Because, by the way, most of us as parents, we're not experts in neurodiversity or the
No.
other factors, and neither are the teachers. They may
No.
want to help, but they don't understand the nuances. They may not have understood neurodiversity with girls and all the other complexities, and how we now frame it in a modern context. So it's like two people coming together who are both speaking different languages, and neither of them properly understand the language they're speaking. And so
Yeah.
you can imagine how it's just like, even for the want of connecting, you cannot. Whereas when you can take evidence that's structured, that's been professionally designed, and that it doesn't have to be the Do It Profile, it can be anything that enables you to have a productive conversation where you can meet, and where you can understand, so that you don't end up like this. So that would
Yep.
be my, like, a mega tip for you. If you find you're struggling to communicate with your school, find some other mechanisms that can support you, that provide evidence in a meaningful way, that is like professional guidance that comes outside of your own knowledge and expertise. That's my bit, Amanda. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you for the plug for Do It Profiler. We have a parent version and we've got a teacher version, and we've got a comparison of parent and teacher, because particularly girls might present differently at home to school. So that can be really important. So I think one of the key points that you've just made, which I think is really important, teachers are not mind readers, right? And if they don't know your child, they're not going to know the things that your child does well, likes to do, doesn't like to do, causes them angst. So I think you're right, having something constructive and collated is useful. If you can't have access to something like Do It Profiler, you can write down, just on a sheet of paper, what does your child like? What does your child not like? What are their strengths you see? Describe that. Tell the teacher in a page about your child. All right. That can be really helpful because, you know, they're not going to know your child. So how can they help? And they've got 30 children, or if they're a Senko, they've got 1,000 children in the school. You know, how are they going to know if you don't? How are they going to share that information with other teachers? So that can really be helpful. The other thing is, I think that if you start that relationship and say, I want to share this information, could we do a homeschool diary? Is that possible for us to do? So if my child has had a bad day at school, I know what's happened, even if it's just a quick note to say, it was a great day at school. That's lovely as a parent to hear things have gone well. You can talk about that with your child at home. And if their child has had a bad night or evening, or they've said something, you're then in partnership rather than loggerheads. And that can make a huge difference in terms of mindset. Theo, did you want to jump in?
It's just very important because something we did with our school was that, but also the flip side is they said, you let us know if they've had a bad morning. So like so that we could let them know, actually our child has just had a meltdown before coming in and we really struggled to get them out. It was horrendous.
Yeah.
Now you know, and then they can know that, right, we need to be extra mindful of the child and supporting them. So it can go two ways then, and that becomes
all the time
dialogue, which is powerful.
A dialogue. So this is really important. It's not your going, because you do feel like, and you know, I've done research and asks thousands of parents about what they do, and often they feel like they're in a battleground and they have to fight. And I think the challenge then, it becomes a sort of you're not doing, and it becomes a sort of, it doesn't feel a very good relationship. So if you start saying, look, you know, I want you to see the best in my child. These are all the things about my child that I think are wonderful, and the things that they love, and they love SpongeBob SquarePants or whatever it is, that's their thing, or Bluey or whatever they're watching at the moment is their thing. Then the teacher's already got a bit of language they can work with, and that dialogue, that homeschool diary, can be life-changing. And for the teacher, it might be just a sentence, great day, or lunch was difficult, or they didn't eat anything, you know, but it allows you to have that conversation with your child as well. So I think those are really important to start that relationship off in the right sort of way. And then log it, if you can, and you've got information, other information, professional information, provide that. So you've got that next layer of information, if you want to, as an endorsement of, it's not just me, I've got this information from other people, perhaps you want to read this, you know, and then so create a relationship with school. I think that's really helpful.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think the feeling like it's a battleground, it does. And sometimes, from my experience, you have to learn to let some things go, because some things are just not possible. So we really wanted our child to do more touch typing in school, and you know, it kind of never, it happened a bit, it never really got off the ground. But the problem is, you've got a number of you've got like maybe 20 things at any one point you're requesting the school to think about and to do, and you don't have the full understanding of what's going on behind closed doors within the school and the challenges that they face and everything else going on. So I think as a parent, you also have to think, do I constantly want to be battling on every point of
you can't.
And it's not going to be good for the school, because they're just going to feel like they're constantly being shouted at, which is not nice. And you know, we need to make the teachers feel good, right? Because they're looking after our kids.
It's a hard job. It's a hard job. And I think that goes for things that, so I think home and school, right? You've got all these news, this 500 news, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, how are we going to manage this? Pick 3 and focus on 3. And that goes for school as well. That focuses at home. What are the 3 things that you could do in the next couple of weeks? What can you do? You're not going to be able to do all of it, right? So let's prioritize. That goes for everything. That's like your adult life and work as well. You've got lots of challenges. You can't deal with 20 challenges. Nobody can, right? And you, like, you know, I've got 3 kids. So, and I had a job, juggling a job, and everything else, right? So you have to go, what's realistic, and be pragmatic about the things that can make a difference. So if it is dressing and undressing so they can get to sport, right? Or it's that you have a clear pencil case and you put a list in the pencil case of all the items so they can see what's in there. What are the strategies you can do that are going to help your child? Strategies or something you can teach them in a week. If you're not going to be able to, then adapt or avoid, right? Or support. So if you can't teach it, adapt, avoid, or scaffold, and be realistic about what your time frame is, because you've probably got 100 other things you're trying to do at the same time. So in 2 weeks, you are not going to, it takes a long time for a child to walk or to learn to ride a bike. So, be realistic and do an adaptation or avoidance or scaffold for the time being and go, okay, we're going to do these 3 things, but then at half term, perhaps we'll practice this skill, right? Because we've got a little bit more time to do so. And be kind to yourself, because, parenting is a knackering process. It really is. And you've got to survive the long game. I've realized I'm still a parent to my 40-year-old plus children. I haven't retired being a parent, right? So it's a long game you're playing, right? Not a short game.
Absolutely. And listen to your kids as well. I think
Yeah.
often because of the media, because of all the negativity that surrounds many topics, because of what other parents say, because sometimes what teachers say, we constantly have this kind of feedback that is hard to ignore. But then what we miss is the really obvious feedback from our children. And often it's not necessarily they will say something,
No.
it's the response to something. And we think, oh, but you've got to, no, you're not going on your pads because that's bad for you. Except I know for a fact it is one of the most powerful ways to switch my child's brain from being in a traumatic space and place where they're very upset to really calibrating. And so there's things that you learn over the time that it's irrelevant what the world is saying. I absolutely know that this thing is bad for my child or good for my child, and therefore you can manage them in moderation or whatever else. And it takes a while, I think, for a lot of parents to realize that the child actually has so much.
They tell you, they show you.
Knowledge. So, for example, just nutritionally, before we wrap up, and this is how incredible it is. Nutritionally, one of my children at one point was eating 3 boiled eggs in a row, and they were about 3 years old, right? 3 boiled eggs, and 3 or whatever. They were really young, and we would just be like, they don't eat eggs now, by the way. So that is a whole other thing.
Yes.
Right?
It is. Eggs. We can talk about diet another day.
Yeah. But just if we think about that, they ate 3 boiled eggs in a row. Then there was an obsession around eating banana just for bed. Then there's been all these other obsessions, right? Think about the nutrients and the benefits of eating 3 boiled eggs at that early stage of growth, right? Think about everything that's in it. Think about brain and body and mind, right? Then think about bananas, potassium. Actually, we were advised by the ADHD SEND specialist. Oh, have you tried bananas? We were like, because of the potassium, they're good just before bed. And I was like, well, we have, but not by our try. Like our child just obsessively started to eat bananas. So just in those 2 examples from a nutrition perspective, translate that into almost anything else, and you will be amazed at what signs your child is giving you that most time you may just think, no, you're not having 3 eggs. That's ridiculous. It was bad for you. Or you're not having banana before bed. You're not eating in your room. Well, wait a minute. They're showing you something. And
I think it's that. It is. I think that's one of the hardest things we started at the beginning of this around the social pressure of conforming to parenting in a neurotypical world, of having to behave in a certain way. And there's a whole variety of things that we know work for our kids and help them emotionally to stabilize. And we have to make compromises. So if you're a parent, observation's really important. I always think of every time. If you pick up every time I see X, Y happens, just think about what's happening. So it could be every time somebody comes around and they want to go out the room, think about that every time you see X, what's happening, and then see if you can change that, or see whether that's a mechanism for coping. And I think that sort of every time perspective is a really useful one as well. And just, yeah, be kind to yourself and listen and observe your child. I agree with you so much, Theo. Your children show you, tell you, even not necessarily verbally, but they will express what their needs are. And sometimes we deny that because we go, no, you've got to do it this way because this is what people tell you you should be doing. And it isn't the right way for your child.
Absolutely. And I think that's a lovely way to bring it to a close today. Look after yourself. Don't beat yourself up in all this preparation. Understand that there will be highs and lows at whatever part you're in.
Lots of funny times as well.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the things that I look back on, I mean, we won't go into that, but just there is so many moments that stand out as really unique, odd, unusual, and
Wonderful.
that is just beautiful. That is like that is just shows the wonder, and we need it at the moment. The wonder of the planet, the wonder of the earth, the universe that we live in is extraordinary, and so are our children. So I think we need to remind ourselves of that in all those difficult moments. So Amanda, you've been incredible as always. If you want more information on this, you want a deep dive, pop over to Do It Profiler. There's support there, but also Amanda's newsletter. Amanda, remind me of the name of the newsletter.
Neurodiversity 101.
Neurodiversity 101. You can go on Amanda's profile on LinkedIn. You can follow that. You can look in the back diary, story, whatever, because she's written loads of
more than 200 newsletters are there, all there ready for you.
on children, on families, on back to school, changes in environment, and all of that stuff. So like if you really wanted to deep dive, do that. The other thing, which we've mentioned a few times, but go and join your local communities on Facebook that are like SEN communities, or there's loads of them, right? I'm a member of a few locally here, loads of parents, you probably are people, but if you're not, like there's always parents sharing the real stories, the challenges, really the struggles, and actually often in our community, we know people are doing it, actually putting their name forward. Sometimes they anonymize it, which is fine, but other times you get to realize people in your community who you know, and they're sharing their struggles. You actually have an opportunity to reach out and help them if you're further down the line. And I think that's a powerful thing to pay it forward, really pay it back forever. So please go do that. Thank you. Incredible. It's Friday. I'm going to now disappear as Amanda will. We've got lots of other stuff to do. It's been great having you here, Amanda. And thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, Theo, for inviting me.